Hello. Hey, how you doing? What's up, everybody? Welcome to Kooks, Cranks, and Iconoclast, the podcast. I'm your host, Mike Lucht, and this episode, something I've been looking forward to for a minute now. I think this might be a big one. Not sure on the read time, so without further ado, let's just jump right into the occult founding fathers. When we speak of the founding of the United States, the textbooks, you know how much we can all trust those, the textbooks tell us a story of taxation, tea thrown into the Boston Harbor, Enlightenment political philosophy, and the practical concerns of wealthy colonists chafing under British rule. But beneath this surface narrative lies another history entirely, a shadow history of secret societies, esoteric philosophies, and the deliberate construction of a nation conceived not merely as a political experiment, but as a magical working. A massive ritual of cosmic ordering designed to bind a new civilization to hidden laws of the universe. This is the story of the occult founding fathers, not the sanitized deities of American civic religion, but the complex, contradictory men who believed they could use ancient hidden wisdom to build a geometrically aligned utopia in the wilderness, while simultaneously constructing that utopia on the backs of enslaved human beings. They were, in every sense that mattered to their own understanding of themselves, wizards with slaves. To understand these men, we must first understand how they understood themselves. The worldview of America's founders wasn't strictly conventional Christianity. It was a deeply fascinating hybrid of Enlightenment rationalism, deism, Freemasonry, and Hermetic revivalism. When we speak of the occult today, quote-unquote occult, we often picture dark rituals or horror movie tropes. But to the intellectual elite of the 18th century, occult simply meant hidden knowledge, the intersection of esoteric philosophy, ancient history, sacred geometry, and early science. The first philosophical pillar we must examine is deism. Most key founders, Jefferson, Franklin, Washington, Paine, were deists. They rejected standard Christian orthodoxy, particularly miracles and the divinity of Jesus, in favor of what they called a clockmaker god, or the great architect of the universe. This concept posits that the Creator designed a perfectly balanced, rational universe, governed by natural laws, then stepped back to let it run. The universe was a machine of divine precision, and human reason was the key to understanding its workings. But deism was only one thread in the tapestry. Another was Hermeticism, rooted in ancient Egyptian Greek texts attributed to Hermes Trismegistus. The core Hermetic principle, as above, so below, taught that the material world reflects the spiritual world. The founders sought to build a physical civilization that mirrored the ideal harmonious cosmic order. They weren't merely building a nation, they were building a reflection of heaven on earth. Perhaps no text obsessed the founders more than Sir Francis Bacon's 1625 utopian novel, New Atlantis. Bacon, a towering philosopher, statesman, and rumored leader of the Rosicrucian order, penned a narrative that functioned as a literal prophetic blueprint for the colonization of the New World. The story follows a crew of European sailors who discover a hidden island nation called Ben Salem. At its heart stands Solomon's House, a magnificent state-funded research center dedicated to studying God's creation, uncovering the secret laws of nature, and using them to improve human life. The founders explicitly viewed America as the realization of this esoteric prophecy. Through secret societies like the Rosicrucians and the Freemasons, Bacon's vision was preserved and passed down through generations. Bacon was directly involved in the Virginia Company charters of 1609 and 1612 that funded the Jamestown settlement. Esoteric scholars argue that Bacon actively directed secret groups to ensure that the seed of the new Atlantis was planted firmly in American soil. But the lineage extended even further back. Before the School of Night, before the Invisible College, there was Dr. John Dee. As the court astrologer, mathematician, and intelligence asset to Queen Betty the Foist, Dee was the original conceptual architect of the British Empire, a term he explicitly coined. However, Dee's imperial ambitions were entirely driven by his nocturnal actions. Rigorous ritualistic scrying sessions conducted with his seer Edward Cauliflower Ears Kelly, which resulted in the reception of the Enochian system of magic. Dee didn't view magic and statecraft as separate pursuits. Using his massive library at Mortlake, he formulated a legal and mystical thesis for Queen Elizabeth, asserting that England had a rightful cosmic claim to the North American continent. He synthesized legends of King Arthur and the Welsh prince Meric to prove prior European settlement. Crucially, it was John Dee who first referred to the New World as Atlantis in his maps and imperial treaties. He viewed colonization not merely as land acquisition, but as a mandatory occult operations campaign to reclaim the primordial territory of Atlantis and bring it under the government of the angels. The Enochian entities, such as Uriel, Nalvij, and Madimi, etc., dictated a system of magic that was relentlessly geometric, bureaucratic, and grid-based. At the center sits the Great Table, a hyper-complex system of 4 massive elemental tablets divided into precise grids, columns, quadrants, etc., filled with angelic letters and numbers. This is the exact operational logic used by the Masonic planners of Washington, D.C., by taking wild land and mapping it into a strict geometric grid dictated by celestial alignments. They were executing a massive landscape-scale variation of an Enochian tablet, constructing a physical holy table on the earth. Following Dee's death, his manuscripts passed through the elite British networks. Members of the School of Night, like Thomas Harriot, and the Invisible College, like Robert Boyle and Elias Ashmole, were profoundly inspired by Dee's synthesis of hyper-advanced mathematics and hermetic operations. Ashmole systematically collected Dee's manuscripts and were simultaneously one of the first recorded speculative Freemasons initiated on English soil. Through this pipeline, the geometric and cryptographic principles encoded within Enochian magic were laundered directly into the foundational rituals of high-degree European Freemasonry. The School of Night, alternatively dubbed the School of Atheism, was a clandestine cabal of Elizabethan courtiers, scientists, poets, and occultists operating as a shadow think tank. During an era of brutal religious wars and suffocating state censorship, the group was dedicated to stripping away dogmatic theological frameworks, pioneering experimental natural science, and integrating highly volatile hermetic philosophies into Anglo-American aristocratic circles. The membership reads like a roster of the Elizabethan avant-garde. Sir Walter Raleigh, the glamorous explorer who established the Roanoke colony, which mysteriously disappeared, as history tells us. Thomas Harriot, the mathematical genius who mapped Virginia and mastered the Algonquian language. Christopher Marlowe, the radical playwright and covert intelligence agent who may or may not have been the real William Shakespeare. Henry Percy, the wizard earl who turned his estates into massive private laboratories. And George Chapman, the esoteric poet who encoded the group's doctrines in dense hermetic symbolism. Their core philosophy was a radical fusion of hyper-rational scientific skepticism and advanced Western ceremonial magic. Influenced heavily by Giordano Bruno and John Dee, they practiced magia naturalis, or natural magic, the belief that the physical universe was a living geometric cryptogram encoded by a divine source. By mastering mathematics, astronomy, chemistry, and optics, they believed they could decipher this cryptogram and claim the powers of terrestrial gods. They viewed the nations of the Old World as rotting under papal decrees and monarchical stagnation. And they weren't wrong. To break this stagnation, an entirely new territory had to be secured where hidden laws of nature and spirit could be implemented without fear of the stake or the gallows. If the School of Night was the dangerous underground cell of the Elizabethan era, the Invisible College was the sophisticated transitional bridge that brought their radical ideas into the light. Emerging in the chaos of the 1640s during the English Civil War, this decentralized network of natural philosophers, alchemists, and mathematicians operated as a shadow intelligence network. The term was popularized in private letters by Robert Boyle, who described a secretive philosophical college, quote-unquote, that valued knowledge above political or religious factions. The membership included Boyle himself, universally celebrated today as the father of modern chemistry, yet simultaneously a lifelong alchemist, hunting for the Philosopher's Stone. There was Samuel Hartlib, the Prussian-born polymath who ran a massive continent-spanning correspondence network functioning like a 17th century internet. John Wilkins, the clergyman and mathematician obsessed with cryptography and the possibility of space travel. Sir Kenelm Digby, the flamboyant privateer famous for his, quote, powder of sympathy, unquote, a form of alchemical sympathetic magic. And Elias Ashmole, the legendary antiquarian and astrologer who served as the literal human link between the Rosicrucian-infused Invisible College and formal Masonic lodges. Their philosophy was dictated by Bacon's concept of the Instauratio Magna, the belief that humanity could restore itself to the divine knowledge that Adam possessed before the fall of man. They viewed nature as a living cryptogram bound by invisible strings of sympathy and antipathy. Mathematics and geometry were theurgic tools. If they could understand the exact mathematic ratios governing the cosmos, they could engineer society, eliminate disease, control weather, and design a flawless civilization. In 1660, the Invisible College executed its masterstroke. They stepped out of the shadows. Using elite aristocratic connections, they secured a royal charter from King Charles II, officially morphing into the Royal Society of London. While the public face was dedicated to empirical science, the inner directory remained saturated with esoteric dreams. This is the exact pipeline through which the new Atlantis vision was preserved. Benjamin Franklin didn't pull his ideas from thin air. He was elected a Fellow of the Royal Society in 1756. He was drinking directly from the reservoir of knowledge that began with the School of Night and flowed through the Invisible College, amongst many other things I'm sure he was also drinking at the time. Known party animal, real ladies' man, we'll say. The connection to the American experiment was immediate. John Winthrop Jr., the alchemist governor of Connecticut, was a devout follower of the Hartlib Circle and became one of the first colonial fellows of the Royal Society. He sailed to the New World with a massive library of occult, alchemical, and Rosicrucian texts, explicitly viewing the American wilderness as the perfect laboratory to build the first physical outpost of Bacon's New Atlantis. But before the Revolutionary era, before the Founding Fathers, another esoteric current had already taken root on American soil. In 1694, long before George Washington donned his Masonic apron, a brilliant German mystic named Johannes Kelpius led a commune of roughly 40 Rosicrucian scholars into the wilderness of Germantown, Pennsylvania. They were known locally as the Hermits of the Ridge. Driven by complex astrological charts and hermetic calculations, Kelpius believed that the world would end in 1694, which, looking around, I don't think it happened that way exactly, but it would signal the arrival of the, quote, woman in the wilderness, described in the book of Revelation, probably an alternative understanding of Babylon. To prepare, the monks dug a precise subterranean stone meditation cave deep in the Wissahickon Valley. Hopefully I got that right. Inside a dark chamber, they conducted primitive laboratory alchemy, practiced early esoteric medicine, and used telescopes to monitor the night sky for celestial alignments. Kelpius died in 1708 without his apocalypse, but legend states that he possessed a real-life Philosopher's Stone. On his deathbed, he ordered his disciple to throw it into the Schuylkill River. I think that's how you say it. When it hit the water, it reportedly detonated like a violent flash of lightning, and the cave still exists to this day. The esoteric German current expanded in 1732 when Conrad Beissel founded the Ephrata Cloister in Lancaster County. The community practiced radical asceticism, sleeping on wooden benches with stone pillows, waking up at midnight to anxiously await the second coming of Christ, adopting a strictly vegetarian diet. Ephrata housed one of the most advanced printing presses in early America. While they printed standard religious materials, they secretly operated as the primary distribution hub for Hermetic, alchemical, and Rosicrucian texts in the colonies. They developed an entire system of highly complex geometric fractal calligraphy and mystical hymnody, written in mathematical tones designed to induce altered, trance-like states of consciousness during their midnight vigils. By the time the revolutionary generation came of age, they were swimming in these waters. The worldview they inherited wasn't one of simple Christian piety or secular rationalism, but a complex synthesis of deist clockwork universe Hermetic reflection of cosmic order, Baconian prophecy, and Masonic ritual technology. They believed that they were the inheritors of a great plan thousands of years in the making, a plan conceived by ancient mystery schools, preserved by secret societies, and finally ready for manifestation in the wilderness of the New World. This is the context in which we must understand the 6 primary architects of the American experiment. Now, there's a whole lot more than that, but to keep things simple, I just narrowed it down to 6 primary architects. Not as marble statues, not as demigods of a civic religion, but as men who understood themselves to be performing a massive working of demiurgic theurgy, using the tools of the cosmic architect to bind a chaotic wilderness into a rigid, enlightened grid. So first up, of course, George Washington, the silent architect. Born 1732, died 1799. Continental Army Commander-in-Chief and first president. To the public, he was the stoic, indispensable gravity well that held the fragile coalition of states together. But beneath his public persona lay a deeply esoteric orientation. Washington was initiated into Fredericksburg Lodge No. 4 in 1752. He was raised to a Master Mason in 1753. While there's no documentation suggesting he remained an active member throughout his life, he was continuously surrounded by Masons and could absorb Masonic knowledge casually. His military career can be viewed as putting early Masonic ideals into practice with a vengeance. The Continental Army was his true lodge, a fraternity and band of brothers united for a common cause, surrounded by symbols of death, sacrifice, and nobility. His most public Masonic appearance occurred on September 18, 1793, when he participated in the cornerstone laying ceremony of the U.S. Capitol while fully dressed in Masonic regalia. I believe the thumb pick for this episode is a painting dedicated to that moment. This included an apron embroidered by Lafitte. This wasn't mere ceremony. It was a literal theurgic ritual, stamping the seed of American governance with Masonic consecration. Rosicrucian traditions claim Washington was consecrated in the first American Rosicrucian Supreme Council at Wissahickon. Conversely, Washington deeply mistrusted the Illuminati, explicitly condemning them as, quote, self-created societies, unquote. In a letter to Reverend George Washington Snyder, that's not confusing in any way, on October 24, 1798, he acknowledged that, quote, the doctrines of the Illuminati, unquote, had spread into the United States, but maintained that American Masonic lodges hadn't been corrupted by them. There's actually an apocryphal tale that Adam Weishaupt made it to America, the founder of the Illuminati, Adam Weishaupt, made it to America and supposedly dispatched George Washington in some way and took his place, as they are said to have more than a small resemblance to one another. But once again, this is just an apocryphal tale. Washington's papers reveal a man attuned to mystical currents. An account published in 1880 details a vision he allegedly experienced during the bitter winter of 1777 at Valley Forge. According to this narrative, a beautiful female entity appeared to him, showing him a vast map of the world and predicting 3 great perils that America would face, including the Civil War, before ultimately triumphing to preserve the Union. In 1770, a Grand Sachem approached Washington, recalling the Battle of the Monongahela, prophesying that because a mightier power had shielded Washington from targeted gunfire, he couldn't be killed in battle and was destined to become the founder of a mighty empire. Next, we have John Adams, the cosmic moralist. Born 1735, died 1826. The fiery, hyper-intellectual Massachusetts lawyer, diplomat, and second president. His vision for America was as a moral, self-correcting constitutional republic rooted in classical Republican virtue. He feared democracy would rot into tyranny without strict institutional checks. While raised in a strict Puritan environment, Adams transitioned into Unitarianism and rational deism. He rejected Orthodox Christian dogmas like the Trinity in favor of cosmic singular source of universal order. Though he avoided formal secret societies like Freemasonry, his legacy is deeply intertwined with theurgic balance. Alongside his wife Abigail, who actively used classical mythological and astrological framing in her writing, Adams viewed the American experiment not as a mere political rebellion, but as a preordained cosmic drama driven by divine providence. He died on July 4th, oddly enough, 1826, exactly 50 years after the signing of the Declaration of Independence, a synchronicity shared with Thomas Jefferson that alternative researchers view as a deliberate symbolic temporal closure. Speaking of Thomas Jefferson, he's up next, the Gnostic rationalist. Born 1743, died 1826, the polymath author of the Declaration, diplomat, and third president of the United States. His vision was of an agrarian, decentralized utopia populated by self-reliant citizens, free from centralized baking, state-mandated religion, and standing armies. Jefferson famously utilized a razor blade to literally cut the miracles, resurrections, and supernatural elements out of the New Testament to create the Jefferson Bible. This practice mirrors ancient Gnosticism, the conviction that spiritual truth is found through personal reason, knowledge, and ethics rather than blind submission to church dogma. In an 1823 letter to John Adams, Jefferson explicitly unmasked Orthodox Calvinist theology as, quote, daemonism, unquote, framing the conventional church god as a malevolent spirit, essentially identifying it as the Gnostic demiurge that keeps humanity imprisoned. Jefferson's deepest ideological obsession was rooted in pseudo-mythical pre-Christian European past. In 1776, he was appointed to the first committee to design the Great Seal. While Franklin proposed biblical imagery, Jefferson demanded the seal feature Hengist and Horsa, the legendary 5th century pagan Saxon brothers who invaded Britain. Jefferson believed that the primitive Anglo-Saxons practiced a pure, uncorrupted form of natural liberty before the Norman conquest introduced kings and Christianity. He viewed the revolution not as the birth of a new idea, but as a magical restoration of an ancient pre-Christian political golden age. James Madison, the geometer of statecraft, born 1751, died 1836, the brilliant, frail political theorist known as the father of the Constitution. Madison was a staunch advocate for the total separation of church and state, deeply steeped in Enlightenment deism. He viewed human governance the way scientists viewed physics, a system of natural laws that could be mapped, calculated, and mathematically balanced. In a writing called Federalist No. 10, he engineered a sprawling extended republic specifically designed to diffuse, dilute, and compartmentalize human passions, checks and balances. By taking chaotic impulses and forcing them into a rigid constitutional grid, Madison performed a masterclass in demiurgic engineering, creating a self-sustaining mechanical ecosystem that binds human behavior to a legal matrix. Next up, Benjamin Franklin, the original Poonhound, the alchemical spy master, born 1706, died 1790, the ultimate American Renaissance man, printer, scientist, inventor, diplomat, international celebrity, Hellfire Club member. Franklin was initiated in 1731, served as provincial Grand Master of Pennsylvania in 1734, and printed America's first Masonic books. While serving as a delegate to France, he joined the elite Loge des Neuf Sœurs in Paris in 1777, becoming its honorary master by 1779. He was partially responsible for bringing Voltaire into the lodge, the philosopher who was initiated in Franklin's presence in 1778. Franklin wrote Poor Richard's Almanac under a pseudonym, filling it with astrological charts, weather predictions based on planetary alignments, and moon phases. He was obsessed with creating magic squares and magic circles, complex mathematical grids where every vector adds up to the same sum, sort of a occult precursor to Sudoku. These identical numerical grids are the literal sigils used in classical Western ceremonial magic to summon and bind planetary intelligences. Persistent historical rumors connect Franklin to Sir Francis Dashwood's Medmenham Franciscans, aka the Hellfire Club, during his frequent travels to England between 1773 to 1774. Their motto was Fais ce que voudras, do what thou wilt, which later became the famous slogan of Aleister Crowley. Despite its scandalous reputation, the club comprised highly influential English nobles. Dashwood himself was Chancellor of the Exchequer. I have no idea what that is. I didn't have time to look into it. Sounds kind of boring, but I think we covered it in our Hellfire Club episode that I did with the fellas way back. I think it was like our first episode we did together. Memories. Franklin's connection to Rosicrucianism is strongly linked to his close friendships with the German pietists of the Ephrata community. When the leader of a Germantown mystic brotherhood passed away, his extensive occult library was bequeathed to Franklin. Franklin famously wrote his own epitaph, comparing his body to the cover of an old book whose contents would, quote, appear once more in a new and more elegant edition, revised and corrected by the author, unquote, strongly implying a literal belief in reincarnation. Next, we have Alexander Hamilton, probably the shittiest person in this group. The sorcerer of the treasury, the sorcerer of currency, Born 1755, died 1804. The brilliant, volatile Caribbean-born immigrant who became Washington's wartime aide-de-camp, first secretary of the Treasury, and staunchly anti-immigrant in his later years, oddly enough. Hamilton's vision was a hyper-modern, mercantilist manufacturing powerhouse, driven by an aggressive centralized bank, national debt, and strong federal government. While he exhibited conventional religious leanings at various points, his true worldview was a ruthless, hyper-rationalist adaptation of natural law and systemic organization. Hamilton was the literal alchemist of capital. He understood that money isn't physical reality, but psychological illusion, an egregore sustained entirely by collective belief, credit, and faith. By establishing the first bank of the United States and creating a system of national debt, he transformed abstract promises of future labor into tangible, liquid power. He successfully anchored a spectral, non-physical entity to the physical territory of the United States, constructing a secondary economic matrix that dictates human survival and behavior to this day. There was also the metaphysical women of the era, hardly ever, if seldom spoken of. History often leaves them out, but women were central to the esoteric undercurrents of early America. Martha Washington and Abigail Adams were deeply influenced by the Enlightenment's focus on natural law. Abigail Adams frequently used classical mythological imagery in her letters, as noted before, framing the revolution not just as a political fight, but as a cosmic drama involving destiny and divine providence. There's also the public universal friend, formerly known as Jemima Wilkinson. She was a fascinating religious leader of the Revolutionary era. After surviving a severe illness in 1776, Wilkinson claimed to have died and been reanimated by a genderless divine spirit, a walk-in, it would be referred to today. Not to be confused with Christopher Walken, a walk-in. Reborn as the public universal friend, quote-unquote, they preached a radical doctrine of gender equality, abolition, and direct spiritual illumination, founding a highly successful esoteric community in New York. The design of Washington, D.C. wasn't merely about traffic flow or grand vistas. It was a massive working of sacred geometry, the belief that specific geometric shapes and alignments carry spiritual energy and cosmic order. The city was designed by French engineer Pierre-Charles L'Enfant, a Freemason who embraced the strange history of the land. In 1663, an early landowner named Francis Pope had prophetically named his property Rome, and its border river the Tiber. L'Enfant immortalized this by channeling the actual Tiber Creek into a grand canal system flanking Capitol Hill. L'Enfant's plan embraced the Roman layout, sweeping, radiating avenues superimposed over a strict north-south grid. But this wasn't merely made for aesthetic choices. The geometry was calculated with astronomical precision. The survey was executed by Andrew Ellicott and Benjamin Banneker, the self-taught African-American astronomer and almanac maker. Banneker calculated the solar eclipse of April 3rd, 1791, which occurred in Aries alongside 5 other planets, an augury linked directly to the magical timing of the city's birth. The laying of the city's boundaries was timed with surgical precision. On August 15th, 1791, when Major L'Enfant and Banneker calculated the boundary markers, the sun was tracking through Leo, conjunct with the royal star Regulus, historically known as the heart of the lion and the star of supreme leadership. The layout ensures that on certain dates of political significance, the setting sun aligns perfectly down Pennsylvania Avenue, casting a direct beam of light from the White House to the Capitol building, a landscape-scale stone zodiac. The most physical evidence of esoteric intention lies in the city's alignment to the constellation of Virgo. David Oveson's research demonstrates that Washington, D.C. is astrologically wedded to Virgo, the beautiful virgin, representing wisdom and the feminine spiritual principle. The three foundational pillars, the White House, the Capitol building, and the Washington Monument, form a precise triangle mirroring the positions of three primary stars framing Virgo: Regulus, Arcturus, and Spica. Spica, the brightest star in Virgo, is traditionally depicted as a sheaf of wheat or five-petaled flower. This five-petaled floral representation is the likely occult origin of the five-pointed star on the American flag, and may also be the origin of the blazing star of Freemasonry. The literal geographic shape of the Capitol creates a massive, natural Pythagorean Y. The Capitol nestled in the cleft of the Potomac and Anacostia rivers. In esoteric lore, the Y represents the path of life and the perpetual dualities that the growing soul must navigate. The Boundary Stone ceremony of April 15, 1791, occurred at exactly 3:30 p.m., the precise minute when Jupiter, the most benevolent planet, began rising over the horizon at 23 degrees of Virgo. Master Masons from Alexandria Lodge number 22 laid the marker at Jones Point, positing the traditional Masonic consecrations of corn, wine, and oil. This wasn't a ceremony. This was chronomancy, locking the birth of the Capitol into the clockwork mechanisms of the cosmos. The Washington Monument stands as a massive Egyptian obelisk. In ancient occult traditions, the obelisk represents the sun god Ra and functions as a physical antenna linking heaven and earth. If you examine the D.C. street grid, the intersections connecting the White House, DuPont Circle, Logan Circle, Washington Circle, and Mount Vernon Square form a distinct five-pointed star, a pentagram. Meanwhile, the lines connecting the Capitol, the White House, and the Jefferson Memorial form a Masonic compass. This was the Geomasonic stamp, taking chaotic wilderness and forcing it into a geometric matrix where human movement, behavior, and commerce are bound to celestial checkpoints. Megalopolymancy, once again. The Great Seal of the United States represents perhaps the most concentrated repository of esoteric symbolism in American iconography. Designed over several years by committees involving Franklin, Jefferson, and Charles Thompson, the seal holds profound occult significance. The first committee, appointed July 4th, 1776, the same day the Declaration was approved, consisted of Franklin, Jefferson, and John Adams, assisted by French artist Pierre-Eugène du Cimetière, which sounds a lot like Baron Cimetière, but I'm probably overextending associations there. Franklin proposed a scene from Exodus, Pharaoh chasing Israelites through the parted Red Sea, with the motto, quote, "Rebellion to tyrants is obedience to God," unquote, and fucking A. Jefferson wanted the children of Israel led through the wilderness on one side, and on the reverse, the Anglo-Saxon chiefs Hengist and Horsa. Du Cimetière contributed the crucial elements, the all-seeing eye of providence within a radiant triangle. Congress rejected this design. The second committee, in 1780, brought in Francis Hopkinson, who introduced the red and white striped shield, the constellation of 13 stars arranged as a radiant cloud, and the olive branch with arrows. Still, Congress was unsatisfied. Nothing's changed. The third committee, in 1782, featured William Barton, who introduced the breakthrough element. For the reverse side, an unfinished Egyptian pyramid topped by the Eye of Providence in a cloud of glory. The pyramid symbolized strength, duration, and stability. Leaving it unfinished pointed toward continual spiritual and political labor, a grand work only just beginning. Charles Thompson, Secretary of the Continental Congress, synthesized these elements into the final design. The obverse features the American bald eagle with olive branch and 13 arrows, clutching a scroll reading, quote, "E pluribus unum," unquote. Above its head, 13 stars break through a cloud. The reverse features the unfinished pyramid with 13 rows of masonry containing 72 stones total, representing, according to Manly P. Hall, the 72 combinations of the Hebrew tetragrammaton, the secret names and laws of nature. The mottos seal an esoteric intent, annuit coeptis. He has favored our undertakings. Novus Ordo Seclorum, a new order of the ages. This was a direct, radical statement that America was breaking away from the old world order of kings and popes to start a new, spiritually enlightened era. The phrase is drawn from Virgil, connecting the American project to Roman prophecy. The reverse side of the seal remained largely hidden for over 150 years. It wasn't until 1935 that it made its public debut on the back of the $1 bill, through the intervention of two men deeply immersed in esotericism. Henry A. Wallace, Secretary of Agriculture and later Vice President under Franklin Delano Roosevelt, was a dedicated mystic influenced by Russian philosopher Nicholas Roerich. In fact, it almost got his ass shit-canned. Actually, I think it did get him shit-canned eventually. I'd have to double-check on that. While examining State Department publications on the Great Seal, Wallace was struck by the Latin phrases. He interpreted the unfinished pyramid as a symbol for the incomplete task of building a cooperative, spiritually enlightened global society. He approached FDR in 1934 with a proposal to place the seal on a coin. Roosevelt, an enthusiastic Freemason, suggested the $1 bill instead. I'll do you one better, I'll raise you. Roosevelt took a hands-on approach. When initial designs placed the eagle on the left and the pyramid on the right, Roosevelt ordered them switched so that the pyramid was on the left and the eagle was on the right, honoring classical left-to-right progression from ancient foundations to modern execution. He insisted on adding the Great Seal beneath the two circular faces. The timing was also deliberate. Released in 1935 during the Great Depression, printing symbols of divine oversight and total societal restructuring onto currency was an act of economic magic, meant to instill subconscious hope that America would rise from the ruins to fulfill its secret destiny. This is why the dollar bill is just chock-a-block full of esoteric symbolism, because the more esoteric symbolism on the dollar bill, the more it, inspires these ideas of some occult forbearance intertwined with our currency. To understand the deeper currents of American history, we must examine the work of Manly Palmer Hall, a Canadian-born author, lecturer, and mystic who founded the Philosophical Research Society in Los Angeles in 1934. His 1944 book, The Secret Destiny of America, codified the occult founding fathers' theory. Hall's core thesis is breathtakingly cinematic. Thousands of years ago, a great plan was conceived by ancient mystery schools to establish a democratic, enlightened global civilization. America was chosen as the laboratory for this grand experiment. According to Hall, a secretive, unbroken lineage of illuminated minds, which he calls the Order of the Quest, has quietly guided human history. This group included Plato, Plotinus, Charlemagne, Bacon, and eventually key American founders. Their job was to direct humanity towards the philosopher's empire, quote-unquote. Hall dedicated immense time to decoding the symbols of the Great Seal. He argued that the bird on the seal wasn't originally intended to be a bald eagle, but actually a phoenix, the ancient Greco-Egyptian symbol of rebirth and immortality. The phoenix represents a civilization rising from the ashes of the old world to achieve spiritual illumination. The 13 stones of the pyramid, Hall pointed out, represent in ancient mysticism the number of the reconstituted whole, like Christ and the 12 apostles, etc. The pyramid remains unfinished because the quote-unquote secret destiny is an ongoing process. America will only be complete when it achieves universal brotherhood and enlightened governance. Hall explicitly states that America's true spiritual father is Sir Francis Bacon. He argues that the founders were carrying out Bacon's precise instructions, utilizing Masonic lodges to filter ancient ideas into practical political structures. One of Hall's most famous stories takes place in May 1787 during the Constitutional Convention. As the story goes, the founders were hesitating, terrified of committing high treason against the King of England. Suddenly, a mysterious tall stranger, referred to only as, quote, the professor, unquote, stood up and delivered a spellbinding, passionate speech, declaring, quote, God has given America to be free, unquote. The inspired founders rushed to sign the document afterwards. When they looked around, the mysterious stranger, the professor, had vanished from the locked room they were in. Hall hints that this man was an ascended master or an agent of the Order of the Quest. In broader occult lore, the Professor is frequently identified as the Count of Saint Germain, the legendary alchemical wonderman of Europe, rumored to possess the elixir of life and appear across centuries without aging. Other interpretations suggest he was a mortal initiate from the German Rosicrucian networks, or perhaps an ascended master, a being who had achieved total spiritual mastery, transmuted his physical form into pure light, and could materialize physical bodies at will to steer human evolution at critical junctures. The concept of the Professor links to the wider network of secret societies through the esoteric concept of non-human, immortal, or highly evolved hidden hierarchies. Across mystical orders, these entities are known by several names: the Great White Brotherhood, a cosmic council of evolved beings who remain in the upper strata of Earth's atmosphere to act as spiritual government; Ascended Masters, individual humans like Jesus, Buddha, Bacon, or David Bowie, who achieved gnosis and can manipulate time and space; and Secret Chiefs, cosmic unearthly intelligences inhabiting higher planetary spheres who hold the keys to the universe. These hidden hierarchies serve as the literal source of authority for the secret societies. The Order of the Quest is viewed as the terrestrial arm of the Ascended Masters. In high-level Masonic philosophy, the symbols and rituals are earthly reflections of laws handed down by the Supreme Being. The Rosicrucian movement was built on receiving direct guidance from these unseen worlds. But there is another interpretation. The same entities credited with orchestrating America's birth can be viewed through the colder lens of ancient Gnosticism as the Archons, predatory, non-human entities serving the Demiurge, the arrogant lesser deity who constructed the physical universe as a deceptive prison. Where a theosophist sees an ascended master gently guiding humanity towards evolution, a Gnostic sees an archon imposing a rigid artificial script to keep human souls trapped in the material plane. The Great Plan becomes the construction layout of a more advanced cage. The primary weapon of the archons is compartmentalization, law, and geometry, the exact tools used by the secret societies that founded America. The street grid of Washington, D.C., the highly compartmentalized degrees of initiation, the secret ciphers, and the creation of an all-seeing surveillance state map perfectly onto the mechanics of the archons. The eye of providence becomes the omniscient gaze of the archontic panopticon, the spiritual ancestor of a shadow surveillance state, ensuring the inhabitants of the matrix never wake up. This is the ultimate paradox at heart of the American experiment. Whether you view these hidden hierarchies as cosmic guides or cosmic wardens, the structural reality remains identical. They're the architects of a secondary reality, and the United States was engineered from day one to be the ultimate material matrix, a perfectly calculated, astrologically locked grid where human beings are given the beautiful illusion of absolute political freedom while their daily lives, labor, and consciousness are quietly governed by an unseen hierarchy. The 18th century wasn't merely an age of reason. It was also an age of atmospheric anomalies and encounters with the strange. Before the term UFO even existed, thinkers were recording bizarre aerial phenomena as meteors, visitations, or unaccountable phantasmagoria, quote-unquote. In the summer and autumn of 1783, a massive unnatural dry fog or luminous haze blanketed Europe and parts of North America, causing the sun to appear blood red and giving the night sky an eerie, self-luminous glow. During this period, on August 18, 1783, a massive, glowing, cigar-shaped, luminous object slithered across the night sky over England and France. It was observed by multiple royal astronomers and scientific elite. It changed color, hovered, and accelerated at impossible speeds, classified as an anomalous, quote, electric bolide, unquote, that seemed to navigate with intent. Benjamin Franklin, corresponding with these scientific circles, wrote papers attributing the dry fog to volcanic eruption, but the structured aerial craft remained unexplained. The Professor wasn't the only mysterious figure to appear at critical moments. Similar to the signing of the Declaration, when the committee, including Franklin and Jefferson, was paralyzed over the design of the Great Seal, historical lore notes a mysterious pale stranger who approached them with a complete, pre-drawn design featuring the all-seeing eye over the pyramid. The stranger walked away and was never identified. This unknown man appears throughout esoteric history as the magician archetype, a catalyst possessing advanced hidden knowledge who steps out of nowhere at precise historical inflection points to shift destiny, then vanishes. He represents the sudden intrusion of divine will or higher intuition that forces necessary evolutionary leaps. The angel Moroni and the American Gnostic shift in the early 19th century, the foundational landscape of American spirituality, was shattered by Joseph Smith's encounters in upstate New York. On September 21st, 1823, Smith was praying in his log cabin when a pinpoint of light appeared, expanding until the room was brighter than midday. Suspended in this light was a physical entity extraordinarily tall, with a countenance, quote, truly like lightning, unquote. Hair of spun gold, pale skin, and eyes that seemed to burn. He wore a seamless robe of exquisite whiteness, quote unquote, and his bare skin emanated a soft luminescence. The entity introduced himself as Moroni, a messenger sent from the presence of God. He informed Smith of hidden records engraved on metallic plates buried nearby, along with tools to translate them, the Urim and Thummim of biblical fame, described as transparent stone spectacles or advanced optical devices. This encounter gave birth to Mormonism, a uniquely American, radically cosmological religion, explicitly stating that humans can evolve to become physical gods governing their own planets. I mention these various entities because they bear more than a passing resemblance to what are known as the Nordics of UFO fame. While Jefferson never explicitly used the word demiurge, he came terrifyingly close in private correspondence. In an April 11, 1823 letter to John Adams attacking John Calvin's theology, Jefferson wrote, quote, I can never join Calvin in addressing his God. He was indeed an atheist. Or rather, his religion was Daemonism. If ever man worshipped a false god, he did. The being described in his 5 points is not the God whom you and I acknowledge and adore, but a daemon of malignant spirit. Unquote. To Jefferson's Gnostic adjacent mind, millions of Americans were trapped in spiritual illusion, actively bowing to an entity of absolute malice. The closest the Founding Fathers came to an explicit extraterrestrial framework was their universal obsession with the plurality of worlds hypothesis. To deists like Jefferson, Franklin, and Paine, the idea that Earth was the only inhabited planet was an insult to the great architect. In the Age of Reason, quote-unquote, Paine explicitly argued that every star was a sun ruling over its own planetary system, populated by sapient non-human intelligences. He used this framework to dismantle conventional Christianity, arguing that a localized event like the crucifixion made no mathematical sense in an infinite universe populated by billions of alien species. To the founders, the universe was actually alive, packed with non-human minds, governed by cold cosmic laws, a framework laying the philosophical foundations for a universe populated by vast, unreadable intelligences. Now, this is another one of those ideas that was sort of cribbed from Giordano Bruno. In fact, this is the very idea that essentially got him burned at the stake by his Catholic Church compatriots, we'll say. While Puritan authorities viewed Native American spirituality through a lens of demonic warfare, several educated colonial figures stepped out of the framework to study indigenous mysticism. Roger Williams, founder of Rhode Island, published A Key into the Language of America in 1643, the first systematic study of an indigenous language and culture. He analyzed spiritual concepts like the, Kautanowit and the Manitou, pervasive invisible energies inhabiting rocks, trees, and storms, animism. He spent nights in native longhouses observing powwows, entered deep chanting trances to heal the sick and predict weather, fascinated by their manipulation of natural forces. John Bartram, celebrated botanist and friend of Benjamin Franklin, traveled frontiers seeking out indigenous medicine men. He documented that practitioners bound physical preparation of medicine to cardinal directions, astronomical alignments, and spoken incantations. This data laid the foundation for early American folk magic like powwowing or brachere in Pennsylvania, This is directly merging European esotericism with indigenous botanical secrets. The birth of the American intelligence apparatus during the Revolutionary War is deeply intertwined with the exact same secret societies, coded systems, and esoteric networks that fueled the occult founding fathers. In the 18th century, espionage and esotericism spoke the same language. Ciphers, hidden identities, compartmentalized cells, and unseen influences. Before the CIA, there was the Committee of Secret Correspondence, America's first foreign intelligence agency, established in 1775. Its mastermind was Benjamin Franklin. When Franklin was sent to Paris to secure French funding for the war, his primary operational headquarters wasn't a diplomatic office. It was a Masonic lodge. The Lodge of Nine Sisters, or La Loge des Neuf Sœurs, named after the nine muses of Greek myth, was an intensely intellectual and esoteric hub gathering Europe's elite radical thinkers and philosophers, including the aforementioned Voltaire. Franklin joined and eventually became Venerable Master. He used the absolute secrecy and global network of the Masonic Brotherhood to bypass British intelligence. Within the lodge, he recruited elite French aristocratic sympathizers, arranged for illicit arms shipment, and established a ring of double agents. The strict oaths of Masonic secrecy served as perfect, unbreakable security clearance for wartime covert operations. One of the most concrete overlaps between early American spycraft and the occult is the Pigpen cipher, also known as the Masonic cipher. Long before the Revolution, this geometric symbol-based substitution cipher was utilized by medieval alchemists, Kabbalist mystics, and Rosicrucians to encrypt hidden spiritual formulas. It was later adopted by Freemasons to protect ritual secrets. During the Revolutionary War, Washington's intelligence officers and members of the Culper spy ring adapted this exact occult script for military espionage. Because it replaced standard text with grids, dots, and open box angles, British codebreakers who intercepted messages often mistook military intelligence for useless occult symbols or, quote, magical scribblings, unquote, completely missing the troop movements hidden inside. George Washington's role as America's first spy master relied heavily on the psychological framework of secret societies. To run the Culper spy ring, Washington utilized a highly compartmentalized cell structure. Agents used code names, invisible ink, and blind drops. This strict operational security directly mirrored the degrees of a Masonic lodge or Rosicrucian order, where information is restricted only to a need-to-know basis. The Marquis de Laffitte, key military and intelligence liaison between France and America, was an ardent Freemason. Washington and Laffitte shared a deep esoteric bond, frequently meeting in military traveling lodges, quote-unquote, on the battlefield. Through these trusted ritualistic circles, highly sensitive intelligence regarding British movements was passed directly between top generals, insulated from treasonous leaks. The deep overlap between the state's secret eyes and esoteric philosophies is immortalized in the Great Seal, the Eye of Providence. To the esoteric elite, the eye represents the omniscience of the great architect, but to the birth of the American state, it served a dual purpose. It represents the ultimate ideal of an intelligence apparatus, an invisible, all-knowing, omnipresent force watching from the shadows to protect the sovereign state. The concept of the American civic religion provides a transcendent spiritual framework that binds a pluralistic society together. Because the United States was not founded on shared ethnicity or ancient ancestral faith, it required what Abraham Lincoln called a mystic cord of memory, quote-unquote. This secular faith superimposes shared national mythology over traditional religions. It's basically adopting one of the same ideas that Freemasonry is founded on, so that by using a name of a figure such as the great architect of the universe, Jews, Christians, and Muslims, etc., can all pray to the same God under the same roof. The deification of George Washington began immediately after his death in 1799. The most explicit rendering exists in the U.S. Capitol Rotunda. Constantino Brumidi's 1865 fresco, The Apotheosis of Washington. It depicts Washington literally ascending into the heavens, draped in royal purple robes, seated on a rainbow, flanked by the goddesses Liberty and Victory. He's surrounded by 13 maidens representing the original colonies, and scenes depicting Roman gods teaching the young republic secrets of industry and science. In 1832, Congress commissioned Horatio Greenough, I think that's how you say it, to create a monumental statue modeled directly after the statue of Zeus at Olympia, one of the seven wonders of the ancient world. The marble statue depicted a massive, bare-chested Washington, seated majestically on a throne, holding a sheathed sword while pointing towards the heavens. The artistic intent was undeniable. Washington was to be viewed as an American Zeus, the ultimate timeless lawgiver. Mason Locke Weems invented the famous cherry tree myth to establish Washington's flawless moral purity from childhood. He popularized stories of Washington's divine protection during the French and Indian War, claiming indigenous warriors witnessed bullets mysteriously deflected by some unknown higher power. If Washington is the creator/father of American civic religion, Abraham Lincoln is its savior and sacrificial martyr. Lincoln's assassination on Good Friday in 1865 cemented his structural role as a Christ-like figure who died to expiate the nation's sins. The Lincoln Memorial is explicitly styled as a Greek Doric temple. The inscription above his head reads, quote, "In this temple, as in the hearts of the people for whom he saved the Union, the memory of Abraham Lincoln is enshrined forever," unquote. Thomas Jefferson occupies the role of prophet of human liberty. The Jefferson Memorial functions as another Pantheon-style circular temple, enshrining his words as universal dogma. Benjamin Franklin is the enlightened sage and alchemist, an American Prometheus who brought the fire of reason to the common citizen. The structural similarities between American civic religion and the Roman imperial cult are quite striking. Both systems were born of pragmatic necessity, vast, diverse republics requiring unifying spiritual glue. Both feature posthumous deification, the Roman Senate voting consecratio to elevate leaders to godhood, mirrored in Brumidi's Apotheosis of Washington. Both utilize imposing classical architecture, Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian columns to project eternal authority. Both systems require civic rituals and holy days. The 4th of July, Memorial Day, and Veterans Day serve as modern equivalents of Roman triumphal celebrations. The Pledge of Allegiance, standing for the national anthem, and hand-over-the-heart postures function like Roman civic rituals. Public performance pieces of patriotism viewed as baseline tests of loyalty. Both rely on the concept of a prophetic destiny. The Roman Saeculum Aureum, Golden Age, prophesied to bring peace and order, mirrors American manifest destiny and American exceptionalism. The nation views its founding documents as universal truths meant to enlighten mankind. This is stamped onto the Great Seal, Novus Ordo Seclorum, drawn from Virgil, translating to a new order of the ages. But viewed through the lens of Philip K. Dick's Gnostic vision, as outlined in his exegesis, these parallels take on a darker dimension. In February and March of 1974, Dick experienced intense hallucinations and time slips he called the Valis experience. His core revelation boiled down to a single phrase: the Empire never ended. Dick claimed that linear time is a holographic deception. When the veil ripped away, he looked out his window in California and saw not 1974, but ancient Rome. He perceived that the modern United States was merely a technological skin stretched over the eternal skeleton of the Roman Empire circa 70 CE. The architecture of Washington, D.C., the state-sanctioned pageantry, and geopolitical violence were proof that the Roman imperial apparatus had never collapsed. It had simply gone underground, digitized itself, and evolved into the modern Western superpower. In Dick's cosmology, the physical manifestation of this undying empire is the Black Iron Prison, a massive, invisible, omnipresent structure locking humanity into a closed-loop matrix of labor, obedience, and spiritual blindness. The Greek Doric columns of the Lincoln Memorial and the Roman domed Capitol are no longer monuments to liberty. They're the exposed bars of the prison, archetypal motifs designed to project an illusion of timelessness, crushing the individual soul under stone-cold imperial permanence. The deified leaders become holographic wardens. Their apotheosis is an imperial trick. By turning politicians into gods, the empire ensures citizens worship the very mechanisms of their containment. The Constitution and the Declaration, kept in guarded reliquary-style glass cases, become the prison rules, designed to give inmates illusion of legal rights while ensuring they never realize they live in a subterranean imperial dungeon. The patriotic rituals are forms of occult behavior modification, rhythmic, repetitive triggers inducing communal amnesia. By participating in civic religion, the population rehearses its own docility, chanting mantras of the empire so the quiet whisper of true liberation can't be heard. This is the ultimate irony of the title of this episode, Wizards with Slaves. The Founding Fathers used ancient hidden wisdom to construct an astrologically aligned utopia dedicated to human liberty, while physically binding and enslaving the human beings whose labor built the actual stone foundations of that grid. It's the ultimate demiurgic irony. Engineering a flawless, enlightened matrix of light and reason on paper, entirely sustained by hidden machinery of darkness and human subjugation on the ground level. The connective tissue extends forward through history. The specialized fragmentation of the modern world made it impossible for one person to hold all titles: mathematician, cipher master, occult philosopher, spy, openly at least. Instead, the state recreated the dynamic through sub-rosa networks of proximity. During World War II, the Joint Intelligence Committee, MI5, and Special Operations Executive created official umbrellas where espionage, occultism, and literature collided. Charles Henry Maxwell Knight, head of MI5's counter-subversion unit and the real-life M, was a close friend of thriller writer Dennis Wheatley. Knight used Wheatley to draft classified deceptive warfare strategies. He utilized Aleister Crowley as an informal asset to evaluate Nazi occult motivations. Ian Fleming, assistant to the director of naval intelligence, drew inspiration from Knight to create M in the James Bond novels. The Inklings and the Golden Dawn connected through Charles Williams, core member of the Inklings who listened to Tolkien read early drafts of The Lord of the Rings, while simultaneously being an initiate of the Fellowship of the Rosy Cross and maintaining ties to the Stella Matutina magical order. Through Williams, high ceremonial architecture of the Golden Dawn sat at pub tables with C.S. Lewis and Tolkien, bleeding into their conceptualizations of cosmic warfare. The Theosophical Society, founded by Madame Blavatsky and led by Annie Besant, was officially embroiled in the geopolitics of the British Raj. Besant became president of the Indian National Congress in 1917. British colonial apparatus viewed Theosophy with suspicion, treating its lodges as hotbeds for anti-colonial organizing. Because Theosophy preached hidden hierarchies of Mahatmas in Tibet, initiates traveled into contested buffer zones between British and Russian empires, used by both intelligence services as deep cover scouts. H.G. Wells and the Fabian Society represented a secularized, technocratic adaptation of the Invisible College. Wells's The Open Conspiracy argued for a transparent but highly coordinated global elite directing civilization. The Fabians established the London School of Economics to institutionalize their blueprints, mirroring how the Invisible College founded the Royal Society. The true structural link across all of these eras is the methodology of the polymath agent. In the Elizabethan era, John Dee was simultaneously mathematician, cipher master, occult philosopher, and intelligence asset. In the 20th century, this dynamic was recreated through interlocking directorates, the same elite universities and private clubs funneling esotericists, writers, and spy masters into the same rooms, continuing the ancient experiment of shaping geopolitics through manipulation of myth and shadow. So what are we actually looking at when we peel back the layers of America's hidden origins? If you ask the 20th century mystics, you'll hear a beautiful story about a great white brotherhood and ascended masters, a benevolent celestial bureaucracy sending mysterious figures to help humanity build a utopian new Atlantis. But if you look through the colder lens of ancient Gnosticism, a darker shadow history emerges. Tools of these secret societies, the rigid geometric street grids, compartmentalized degrees of initiation, secret ciphers, and creation of an all-seeing surveillance state, map perfectly onto the mechanics of the archons. Whether cosmic guides or cosmic wardens, the structural reality remains identical. They're the architects of a second reality, The United States was engineered to be the ultimate material matrix, a perfectly calculated, astrologically locked grid where human beings are given the beautiful illusion of absolute political freedom while their daily lives, labor, and consciousness are quietly governed by an unseen hierarchy running the world from the shadows since the dawn of time. The birth of American intelligence didn't happen in a sterile government building. It was forged in candlelit backrooms of Parisian mystical lodges and coded in ancient Rosicrucian ciphers. The CIA's modern obsession with secrecy, hidden identities, and global surveillance is the literal grandchild of 18th century ceremonial networks. When we look at the layout of Washington, D.C., the geometric compasses carved into dirt, the obelisks piercing the sky, the astronomical alignments calculated to the precise second a royal star hits the horizon, we aren't looking at historical accident. We're looking at a macro-scale ritual of cosmic ordering. These men called themselves rationalists, deists, and scientists, but in the vocabulary of the ancient mystery schools, they were acting as terrestrial demiurges. They took a vast unmapped wilderness, treated it as raw chaotic matter, and used sacred geometry, ciphers, and laws to lock it into an artificial grid. And here's the dark cognitive dissonance at the center of the engine, the exact paradox of the title, Wizards with Slaves. They used ancient hidden wisdom to construct an astrologically aligned utopia dedicated to human liberty, while physically binding, locking, and enslaving the human beings whose manual labor built the actual stone foundations of that very grid. It's the ultimate demiurgic irony, engineering a flawless, enlightened matrix of light and reason on paper, entirely sustained by hidden machinery of darkness, confinement, and human subjugation on the ground. This is the true secret destiny of America, not merely a nation, but a working, a massive, centuries-long experiment in binding chaos to order, in constructing a physical reflection of cosmic principles upon the earth. Whether that working serves liberation or imprisonment depends entirely on whether one views the hidden hierarchy as guides or wardens. The grid remains, the eye still watches, and the pyramid remains unfinished, waiting for the capstone to descend from the heavens, or from somewhere else entirely. That's going to do it for this episode, folks. Thanks for listening. This was another fun one to get into the research on. I'll include a list of sources for anyone who wants to check out or dig deeper into this stuff. I suggest you do. It's highly fascinating. This is part 2 in a loosely affiliated trilogy. Part 3, the episode that comes next, is going to be some of the loose pieces of the American psycho-spiritual environment, the invisible world that exists right next to and or on top of us, that we walk through and coexist with every day. So please be sure to check that out as well. Yeah, that's going to do it for today. This has been Kooks, Cranks, and Iconoclasts, the podcast. I'm your host, Mike Lucht. I will see you guys on the next episode as we traverse the depths of deep weirdness and the peaks of high strangeness and the outer limits of the Twilight Zone. Peace.
I say it again, you've been had. You've been took.